Hey everyone, Adam with Ox's Odditorium, and today I want to talk to you about one of my favorite games. It's Spartacus, a game of blood and treachery, right here. Why I want to talk to you about this, what kind of spurred the conversation, is I heard Gale Force 9 is coming out with a reprint. It is one of their most popular games. It is, as I've stated, one of my favorite games, so spoilers for the end about if I like it or not in the final thoughts. But the beauty of the reprint is the fact that this game sells for more than retail value on the secondhand market, being an out-of-print game. That's typically what we've seen in the past for a lot of games, which is sad, but now I'm glad that it'll be readily available for more people, as I think this is a great game. Well, for most people. Well, maybe not. I don't know. We'll find. I'll cover that kind of towards the end as well. But I know also that I don't know if they're doing expansions in the reprint or if they're going to like redo them as they kind of did previously. I've been following the game from the beginning because I was a fan of the show Spartacus, and the original game's art is based off of that show. And it was also right when I was getting into gaming. I believe it was the second year I went to Gen Con, and it was one of the games I demoed while I was there and had a blast and have loved it ever since. It's never left my collection. It's got a lot of wear. You might see my game board is actually warped. And kind of with that, I guess, let's jump into going over some of the components for the game. So as I said, you do have your game board here. You have your rule books. You have some tokens. So you have arena tokens with injuries, champions and favor tokens, roasting tokens, your house tokens, and gold. Some other things you'll have are dice. So you have 3 different colors. The blue is for your well, I shouldn't say the blue. The different colors are for different stats. So blue is speed, red is attack, black is defense, and that comes to kind of be an important factor when you're fighting in the arena. You do have miniatures that are in the arena, and then you have your different types of cards. So your starting cards are outlined white here, border. The extra cards are not, so that's pretty easy to distinguish. And then you have your intrigue cards, which are basically your political cards, as this is a very take that kind of game. That's why I said it might not be for everyone. And there is a lot of alliance, backstab, gang up on the winner, or person winning. Now that person's basically out. Now that person is the kingmaker. There's a lot of kind of interesting fluctuation in the game, and I think that's why my friends really like it. We all kind of casually like to give each other a hard time. Then you have your houses. So kind of showing you here, if I was playing the Glaber house, you would set up your house kind of as so, and the borders of your house kind of show you where to put stuff. So you have my gladiators on one side, I have guards guarding my assets per se underneath, and then I have also my slaves generating income for my house. Every house has different starting assets in terms of what they start with, and they also have their own special rules. How you can gain influence in some cases, or also maybe manipulate the game state in one way or another. How you win, which is important to know, is getting to 12 and being at 12 at the end of a round. A lot can happen in a round where you can win or lose influence, so that's why it's specified at the end of the round, and we'll kind of go over how some of that would potentially happen. The game length is also dictated by this tracker. So if I want a short game, I'll start with 5 or 6 influence. If I want a really long game, I can start with 1 or even potentially 0 influence. You can never go below 0. There's no way to track that. I guess you could house rule it if you really wanted to. It's long enough if you don't start with any influence or even start with 1. And also your influence dictates your hand size. So when you want a longer game, well, and then not only that, your intrigue cards, your political cards require so much influence in order to play them. So when you want a longer game, the less you start with, it takes a lot longer to kind of get that engine rolling for you. And kind of on that note, let's go ahead and jump into and show you a couple of these intrigue cards. So intrigue cards come in three forms. You have your guards, which cost 0 influence to own. You have your schemes. So this would be a scheme that costs only 1 influence, Test of the Brotherhood. So you can target Dominus, or house, I guess. I'm the Dominus of the house. They gain 1 influence for every 2 gladiators they exhaust. So in my case here, so let's jump back to my board. If I wanted to play that on myself, I could. I'll target myself, I'll exhaust 2 of my gladiators. So exhausting 2 gladiators, I now gain an influence. So if I was starting at just 1, I'd jump up to 2. Now these gladiators can't be used for later rounds until we go back to the beginning of the phases. So there's 4 phases in the game. And during the upkeep phases when they'd refresh. So, or you can play that on someone else as well. And then the other thing you have here is, gotta find one. Right here. Here we go. Liquidation, a reaction card. So those are the 3 types of cards. I happen to show ones that are all lower value. Let me see if I can find a higher value one that's PG rated, which is right here, Black Market Profits. So if I wanted to play this game, this card here, I need 7 influence for it. So if I'm only at 5 influence, I need 2 more influence. I can look to the other people at the table and say, I need to borrow someone's influence. They readily will not be willing to give you stuff because you never know what's going to happen. This card may be good or bad. So I can wheel and deal with them and say, hey, look, I want to play this card. It's not going to hurt you. I'll give you 2 gold. I'll give you 1 gold maybe, right? Gold can be exchanged at any time in the game. Other assets can be traded, and I'll cover that a little bit more when I jump into the phases. But in order to do that, then I might have to show them my card, pay them off. Gold, like I said, gold can be exchanged at any time. But let's say I convince someone to do it. I borrow their influence. Now I'm technically temporarily higher than the 7. I can play that and gain my 5 gold. Excuse me. Now, let's say it was something mean. Like there are ones like target Dominus loses 1 influence. So maybe I'm like, hey Joe, I need to borrow your influence. Can I borrow 9 influence? And maybe we've had good dealings in the past. And he's like, well, sure, but what's it for? I'm like, well, I really want to get rid of Nick over there, so let's play this together. Okay, here's my influence. Well, I can be not nice and play this card down and say, hey, Joe, thanks for your influence, but now you've just lost 1. That is legal. That's not the binding. The binding would be as if I said, hey, I want to borrow your influence. Can I pay you a gold? I hand him the gold, and then I play the card. Regardless of, I can target anyone at that point. Even if it is reducing Joe's influence or killing off gladiators or whatever's going on. So there is a lot of backstabbing in this game, just to warn you. And then kind of another thing that I just want to cover quickly is stats on gladiators, or also slaves. So they all have kind of these die values, and that dictates then how many dice you're going to take for that. And when they're fighting in the arena, it's the final phase of the game. And when you're fighting in the arena, you will have, let's get back to this here. You'll have each kind of team take a side here, grab a gladiator. I have my gladiator, they have theirs. And you're going to end up fighting. So how this works is the attacker will roll dice, and there's movement with your blue dice and initiative as well. So if I roll blue dice, you see who goes first, and then the number of dice you have are how many spots they can move in the arena. So you're going to end up kind of maneuvering, and eventually somewhere in this red area, people start fighting. Now, I'm just going to roll both sides here really quick just to show you. This is a good example. You line up your dice. Oh, let's zoom it in over here. You line up your dice from highest to lowest, and then you dictate how many wounds are dealt. So in this case, the defender wins this and defends against that wound. But here, the attacker wins this and deals a wound. So in the case of my starting gladiator that has, let's just say 2, 2, and 3, I now have to take a wound, which is actually reducing a die. So let's take out a blue one, and now I have 2 of each color. What's going to happen is eventually your gladiator is going to get down to, you can never eliminate a stat and have more dice. So I can never eliminate my speed stat and have 2 of another attribute, so attack or defense. So what's going to end up happening is you're eventually going to get down to like 1 of each, or in the case of you actually losing, your gladiator doesn't have more. If I still have to take 1 away from here, I now have to go like this. My gladiator has lost. Houses can bet around the board here, and one of the changes in the second edition that they're coming out with is the arena is kind of separate, and they have another separate board for like the betting and I believe cards and things like that. But you can bet on who's going to win, but you can also bet on 2 other factors. You see injury here and decapitation. So with injury is if I have to reduce, let's say I take a hit of 3 and I only have 4 dice left. Well, I take away this many and I only have 1. I've lost 2 attributes. My gladiator is now injured. So during the upkeep phase, you'd be able to try to heal that gladiator. Now, maybe the host, which you decide in the market phase, and we'll go over those in a second, I promise. We'll get there eventually. You have then the host might say, you know what? Your gladiator didn't do well. He's going to die. They have that theme kind of going on as you get the host gets to do the whole thumb action we've all seen in the movies on whether your gladiator lives or dies. There can be payoffs. There can be payoffs at the action of in the exact time of losing. You can do it beforehand, things like that. So it's kind of an interesting factor. Like I said, there's a lot of backstabbing in the game. So that's just one more way for someone to stab you in the back. So this whole game is really about positioning politically and kind of guarding your weak points. And then obviously the last thing that could happen is if your gladiator loses all their dice, they are decapitated. So you can bet on these different categories. You can bet up to 3 gold per one, and you take your little house chip here, put it here saying, you know what, I think there might be a decapitation this fight. Now, if the host kills them, they don't get the gold for decapitation. That's not how that works. It has to be in the natural fight that occurs. Now that I've thrown a whole bunch at you for start with game components and with some rules, there are 4 phases to the game. So kind of getting into, now that you know more details about it, phase 1, upkeep phase. So upkeep is when you will be assessing how much gold your house generates. And how you calculate that is the number of slaves you own versus the number of gladiators you own. So if I own 2 slaves and 1 gladiator, my house gets an income of 1. Throughout the game, you'll be buying more slaves and gladiators from the market. You can also, as I said, all cards are basically multi-purpose. You can also always sell off gladiators or slaves or guards or even intrigue cards for the gold listed in the bottom right-hand corner, or left-hand corner, sorry. So if this is my house setup, I have a net gain income of basically 0. So I have to find other ways to generate gold. Then you can also, if your gladiator is injured, you can roll to see if they heal. And you can also refresh cards because, like, for example, that there's like some that exhaust cards that generate gold, or you can try to exhaust cards to manipulate better wins for you in the arena. All sorts of things going on. This is when you would refresh any exhausted cards that you flipped over. Next phase is the intrigue phase. That's where you get to draw more political cards here. You'll have a hand. Your hand limit is dictated by your influence. And you will then play those cards or be selling off political cards for the gold, depending on where you're kind of at in the game. As the game moves on, a lot more intrigue cards are played because people have their own influence or they don't need as much help to play those. And in the beginning, it's a lot more gold generating. Factors like trying to build your coffers per se, to get hosts, to get more better market cards and things like that. Once everyone kind of goes in the order, so whoever was the previous host or current host plays first and you go clockwise around the table. Once everyone's done there, you go to market. So first, before you actually go to the auction phase, you have the open market phase. And I kind of briefly mentioned before, gold can be exchanged at any time during the game. But during the open market phase, let's say my opponent needs more guards and they're literally not drawing any cards, because that's where you draw them from, is the intrigue cards here. That's where you find more guards. If they're not finding any and they really want some, they can actually buy guards from me. But I might be like, well, look, I can sell this for 2 to just, the discard pile. You need to give me 4. So there's that whole thing where you can try to get any sort of advantage possible. You can buy and sell gladiators. One interesting thing, too, is as gladiators win, so if your gladiator wins in the arena, they gain a favor token. If they win again, they get 2. At the third time, they become a champion. Whenever you get invited and you send either a favorite or champion, depending on their level, they get 2 per kind of token. So if you're a champion, you get the most, which is 6 gold, just for sending your gladiator to the fight. They also, the extra benefit of a champion is you can't have the host kill them. So if I've basically raised a champion, I guess, I can now sell that to someone for a lot more than my gladiator's worth, because they are a protected gladiator. So that's another factor. And if I were to sell them, those tokens go with that gladiator. So that's definitely more incentive to also sell and trade and things like that. Then we go to the auction phase. So the auction phase is really interesting. So this is where you would line up 4 cards for the market and your host token. Okay. So what's going to happen is we're going to reveal the first card. Everyone will take all of their money they have in their coffers, secretly hide it in their hand, kind of under the table, and they'll decide, hey, look, an armor piece flipped up. And I haven't really talked about armor, special, and weapons yet. But when you purchase any of those type of equipment, it's for all of your gladiators in your school. So no matter, you don't attach it to a specific one, but no matter which one go, you get to pick 1 armor, 1 special, and 1 weapon if you have them before they go to the arena. And they give you extra special abilities. So I'm going to decide how much that armor is worth to me. Now, we can see a value in the bottom corner. It's worth 1 gold if you were just to sell that card. But it also allows you to ignore 1 wound in a match, and then you exhaust it. So you're like, well, that's basically a free health for any gladiator I own. So you're going to take of your gold. Let's see, where's all my gold? So let's say I have 5 gold for this market phase. I'm going to decide that's actually worth 2 for me, 3 for me, whatever it is. You're going to hold out how much that's worth, and everyone reveals at the same time. So it's kind of a blind bid. This is where you can really fake people out, because let's say I bid 7 for this, and the next closest is 1. I still have to pay that 7 to get rid of that 7 gold. So let's say I've won my armor. So I'll go ahead and put that wherever I decide. And then we flip over the next one. So, well, here's a special. So like I said, armor, special, and weapon. So you'll do that through all 4 cards. And the final thing you're bidding for is the host. Now, if you win host, there's lots of benefits. A, you gain 1 influence for winning host. B, you become basically the first player. C, you also then have the power to dictate who goes to the arena to fight. You can nominate yourself or someone else. If someone else declines your invitation, they lose an influence. And you also get to say if a gladiator lives or dies in that match. Lots of power for the host. That's a very powerful position to hold. So whenever whoever wins host, and like I said, that's the blind bidding thing. So maybe by the point is you buy all these things, and gladiators can have special abilities. Like some, if you roll doubles, you get an automatic wound, no matter if it's even like worthy of hitting, things like that. Certain slaves have special abilities, whether it's looking at market cards. Oh, I know what this is. Now I get to put this down. I know what's coming here type situation. Or you can, like, they maybe generate extra gold at the beginning, things like that. So they have, outside of the starter gladiators and slaves, you have all sorts of special abilities for the cards. So it's kind of incentive to drain your coffers before you get to host. So you can tell if some people are really waiting to get that host. And then the final phase, which we kind of covered, is the arena phase. So the host nominates 2 people with the expansions, which, like I said, I'm not sure if they're getting released right away with the 2nd edition. But in the base game, it's going to be a 1v1. With expansions, you can have actually multiple gladiators fighting, team battles, things like that. It gets kind of crazy, gets wild, it's fun. You then will have 2 houses, nominate a gladiator, bring any weapons, armors. I believe there's a weapon in here. Yep. Weapons, armor, special. They get to choose 1 of each. No more, no less. Well, you can have less technically if you don't own them. And then you'll have them fight, and then you kind of reset. And like I said, so you have all those things. So holding that 12 influence through an entire round is kind of a lot, because you can lose by not going to the arena. If you literally have no slaves or gladiators, and the host says, Adam, come to the arena and fight, and you're like, I literally can't. Well, guess what? I lose my influence. I've just dropped down. So there's tons of intrigue cards that make you lose influence. So there's a lot that can happen around. But that's kind of the overview of the game. So let's jump to kind of my final thoughts here. I really like this game because my friend group, we're good friends, and we also then like to give each other a hard time. So this game is perfect because we get to lie, steal, cheat, backstab, befriend, all sorts of stuff over and over and over again. And that's really what this game does. So if you're not a person who likes Take That, who likes mean games, who likes being one friend with someone 1 second and the next they turn around and stab you in the back, I would stay away from this game. If you're okay with that style of game, there are so many interesting interactions that this game provides. For example, there was one time where I was trying to kind of get a champion, and I paid off someone to throw one of their slaves into the arena to fight mine. So I basically paid for their slave to go to the arena. They were the host, so we kind of held the power, and was able to then easily kill off the slave, because the slave only has 1, 1, and 1, where the upper gladiators have a lot more stats available to them. And then basically for the rest of the game, that person kept that gladiator under wraps, exhausted them each round, whatever, and I spent the whole game trying to defend my champion gladiator, and it's frustrating, but it's so fun at the same time. So yeah, it is just a game of political intrigue. So blood and treachery is the perfect explanation of this game. Another thing that might deter someone, and I don't know if the second edition is fixing this, there is mature content in here. I tried filtering it from any of the camera shots. Some of the card names have some very vulgar titles, I guess. So if that offends you, I would stay away from it. I don't know if I hope the second printing honestly fixed that. I know they're getting rid of the art from the show, which might help a little bit. And two, it's very, for a plus for me is it is very thematic, but what some people might get offended by the whole slave factor in this game. And they're very straightforward saying, look, this is a slave, this happened. I get that, and I'm not trying to make a political post here. I'm just stating that there are slaves in the game, so if that bothers you, I'd stay away as well. However, the highlights, as I mentioned before, there are so many fun interactions. And this is definitely a game that just creates those experiences that you and your friend group talk about for years to come. Oh, remember that one time someone, had all the income and literally could just pay for anything they wanted, and they ran the game but didn't win. Or that one time that we rigged the games enough for me to get a champion, then you never let me use that champion in the arena. So there are super fun interactions like that. It is the adjustability of the influence is really good. However, one caveat I would say too is I would definitely play at an even player count, if that makes sense. Or I'd say 2 and 3 players is not the greatest for this game, because with 2 players I don't feel it plays that great. 3 players it's easy to have 2 gang up on 1. With 4, at least you have the 2 and 2 kind of thing going on. With 5, there's always that 3 and 2, but then someone might decide, well, look, I'm the bottom of this 3-person alliance, and then they flip sides, and that gets kind of crazy, and then obviously the game goes up to 6. with the expansions. But I guess with the reprint, it'll just be 4. So I would definitely recommend playing with 4 if possible. So that is the downside of it, is there's no really solo mode. This is a very interactive game, very competitive. So it is good though with that. I think the dice combat is fantastic. It's just a fun, simple spin, but you really try to math it out while you're in the arena. How can I make these dice work for me? Is it better to keep my speed so I can... they do have like a... It's your choice to move, attack, which order you want to do. You can't split them. You can't do like a partial movement, attack, partial out. But if you are a fast gladiator, you can move in, attack, and then you know you're going to win the initiative again, so you can move out. And there are different ways, like some gladiators could use their speed dice as defense, so you can like basically drain your defense dice in order to stay active. And so there are a lot of cool character abilities that you can get. And then obviously for me, the nostalgia factor of being one of the first really good games that I did play, and it's just kind of stayed there for me because, like I said, I've been a big fan of the show. So kind of highlights, I think it's a fantastic game. Stay away from it if you're easily offended, or you don't like Take That, or you don't like major player interaction. I mean, this like intertwines players to one of the highest levels of games that I know. You literally have to depend on your neighbors, I'd say for 80% of the game, in some way, shape, or form, or be screwed over by them. But I'm so excited for the second printing. I'm excited to see if this generates any more content or conversation amongst the board game community, and kind of interested to see where Gale Force 9 takes it. I don't know if they'll do more expansions. We'll see. I don't know if they'll reprint the expansions. I guess we'll see, but it is one of their most popular games, so I can see them leaning towards that direction. But with that said, thank you for joining me, and we'll see you on the next one.